Welcome to Tentpole Trauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. On this episode, we discuss Big Trouble in Little China. Okay, I am Sebastian, and I'm here with Jennifer.
Hello.
It's another Just the Two of Us.
That's right.
We've got big plans up ahead, but we needed a kind of mellow week, so we decided to do a movie that we're both pretty familiar with, and I think it sort of fits in well with the last one we did together, which was Army of Darkness. There's some similarities here,
Yep.
I would say.
I agree.
We are doing John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China.
Woo!
Now, this movie came out in 1986. It is a movie that I think a lot of people know at this point, mostly because I think people have probably seen it on cable, or at this point, DVD or streaming or whatever. But not a lot of people saw it when it came out. It came out to little fanfare. It only made, I think, $11 million at the box office total, and it had like a $20 million budget. So it was a pretty sizable failure. And it sort of was another film that I think sort of led to John Carpenter becoming more and more discouraged as a director. Jen, what is your history with Big Trouble in Little China?
I did not see this in the theater for whatever reason. I don't even recall it coming out or seeing it advertised or anything like that. And I went to the movies pretty regularly at that time. I was someone who saw it on cable. I feel like it was on TV a lot.
Yeah.
HBO or maybe other channels. But I mean, I've seen it so many times over the years as soon as it was on TV, and I really liked it. So yeah, it's one that I'm very familiar with and liked it as a younger person and still enjoy it now.
Yeah, I have a similar sort of background with it. I definitely did not see it in the theater when it came out. It came out right near Aliens, and Aliens was my jam, so I just didn't have any time for Big Trouble in Little China. Plus, it looked weird. I feel like there was a music video at the time that had footage from it in the video, but it wasn't the video for the theme song, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just mixing up my memories because it was on cable a lot.
But the video that we're going to talk about later doesn't have any footage from the film?
It does, but that wasn't on MTV.
No, I know. But I kind of have a memory, the same memory that you do, because I did watch a lot of MTV at the time, and I feel like I feel like I've seen clips of it.
Yeah, it had some sort of presence on MTV, I feel like, somehow.
But definitely not. I don't recall seeing a trailer for it at the movies, or I don't know. I don't remember having much awareness of when it was coming out in the theater.
I was aware of it, and I knew it was John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. I had been a huge fan of Escape from New York.
Right.
So I was aware of it because it was them again teaming up, and I was like, oh, maybe it's going to be another Escape from New York type of success, but I didn't hear anything about it, so I just didn't end up seeing it. But since then, I've seen it a lot on TV. Then, as I became an adult, especially when I started working at Cinephile, a lot of mutual friends of ours are big fans of the movie. Our friend Robert is a huge fan of the movie. I watched it on home video, and then one time for his birthday, there was a screening of it at the ArcLight in Pasadena. They had some sort of repertory screening. So we all went to see it for his birthday. So I've seen it a bunch of times, and I just recently purchased the digital version on iTunes because it was $5. So
couldn't afford not to
because we didn't have it in our collection, and it's a movie we enjoy.
Yep.
So we actually watched it about a week ago, and then we had a spot to fill, and I was like, oh, Big Trouble in Little China is actually a tentpole trauma, so we should do that. So we watched it again, which is good because I have a little bit of a hard time keeping certain elements of this movie straight.
I do too. I think this might be one of and again, it's a film that I really enjoy, and I know you do too, but I think, and we'll get into this, but I think the fact of trying to keep things straight is part of maybe the problem with the film.
I wouldn't call this an airtight script. Interestingly, the script began as a Western, a sort of Western that dealt with Chinese mysticism. And it was written by screenwriters Gary Goldman and David Z. Weinstein. And by the time it ended up in John Carpenter's hands, they decided to modernize it because they felt that nobody was going to be into a Western that took place in 1800 San Francisco with Chinese wizards and stuff in it. So they brought in the screenwriter W.D. Richter, who was the director of the film Buckaroo Banzai, Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai in the Fifth Dimension, which is also a movie I know a lot of people love from the 80s. That movie I've always had a tough time with.
Same. It's not really for me.
Yeah, but I can recognize some of that movie in this movie. You could take a Venn diagram of people who love Big Trouble in Little China and Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, and it's pretty much a perfect circle, I would say.
I agree. Yeah.
One day we may have to revisit Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai because I believe that was a huge bomb too.
Okay.
But yeah, I've never really been able to penetrate that one for whatever reason. It just doesn't click with me.
Same, but maybe now will be the time.
Maybe now will be the time. So that brings us up to 1986 and John Carpenter's involvement. Now, this movie was hurried out into theaters because the movie The Golden Child was in production at the time, which dealt with a lot of similar themes. The Eddie Murphy vehicle, which I did see in the theater. Which also stars Charles Dance as the villain. And love Charles Dance. They were afraid that was going to steal some of Big Trouble's thunder. In fact, John Carpenter was like, what are the chances that two movies dealing with like Chinese mysticism would show up in the same year?
It happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
It just gets in the air.
It gets in the air and people are like, oh, I want to make Dante's Peak and Volcano.
Yeah.
It's.
So anyway, they had to sort of hurry out Big Trouble in Little China. And ironically, they had offered Golden Child to John Carpenter and he had turned it down. Golden Child was the more successful movie, but I would argue Big Trouble in Little China is now a more beloved cult classic.
Didn't you say you watched Golden Child not too long ago too, right? Didn't you watch it in the past couple of years?
Yeah,
I
in
feel
the
like you
past couple of
revisited it.
years.
And I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, that you had said it didn't age very well.
It didn't age very well, especially in regards to sensitivity issues.
Right.
And this movie actually, I think, does okay. I mean, obviously, just because it's from the 80s and it's dealing with a lot of Chinese mysticism and Chinese characters, there's a couple of off-color moments, but they're really not that offensive. And I don't know anybody who's Asian that doesn't have at least some mild affection for this movie. I don't know any Asian people that are like, oh, that movie, it insults me. So it's actually held up pretty well. I feel that John Carpenter approaches it with respect, and you can feel that. Even though there's some jokes that are, like Egg Shen's bus is called like Egg Foo Young Tours or whatever. That's about as bad as it gets. There's no real making fun of Chinese people.
No, and I mean, I don't even think that. I think that's more just about what life was like in San Francisco Chinatown
Right,
at the
it's
time.
more a statement on tourism,
Right.
that's what he would put on his bus.
Cashing in on, he's like leaning into this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty respectful overall, and it deserves kudos for that.
Yes.
That's about all we need to say about setting it up. Why don't we just get into the movie?
Let's get into it.
Now, I will say that right off the bat, I think the movie doesn't start off on a great foot because it gives you this strange opening scene where the character of Egg Shen, played by the famous Chinese character actor Victor Wong, who's great, and if you've seen any movies from the 80s that dealt with Chinese people, he shows up a lot. He's got this great kind of squinty look. He was an older gentleman even at the time, and he would be in Carpenter's next film, Prince of Darkness. But he's being interviewed by this lawyer, and the lawyer's asking him questions about the events of the movie that you're about to see.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of trying to piece together what they're talking about. And he's asking about Jack Burton.
Mm-hmm.
And Egg Shen's like, oh, don't blame Jack Burton for any of this. And then he starts asking him, if he believes in demons and spirits and ghosts. And Egg Shen is like, oh, yes. And then he holds his hands up and this like lightning goes between his hands.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that, magic is real and
Mm-hmm.
he's some sort of wizard or magic user. But it's like a real head scratcher. I would have liked to have watched the director's commentary that's actually on the digital copy,
Mm-hmm.
which I plan to watch because I hear it's pretty fun. John Carpenter and
Kurt Russell, right?
Kurt Russell
Yeah.
get kind of drunk or something
Oh,
while they're
nice.
watching the movie, I
Okay.
guess. It sounds like a good time. However, I was like, I bet there's something about this opening in the commentary. And I read on Wikipedia that Carpenter on the commentary says that the studio didn't understand the character of Jack Burton. They just couldn't get the movie. So he felt that he had to write some kind of opening intro that would help explain things better.
But it doesn't.
I know. I think if anything, it gives you more questions.
Right. It doesn't. All it is getting Egg saying, like, we owe a debt of gratitude to Jack Burton, and he's not to blame for this, and yeah, and the magic stuff comes up, and I mean, it's all over the map.
Right. And not to jump ahead, but we might as well. If you think about that opening scene and then you go to the end of the movie, it doesn't tie in at all because Egg Shen isn't arrested or anything or held responsible for the events of the movie. He goes off
on
to vacation.
Yeah.
Right. So since when did this lawyer come into play?
Yeah.
And why is anybody blaming Jack Burton for anything? Because he's not really the main character of the movie, ironically.
No, there's so many other people involved.
Yeah.
Like, why single out Jack Burton?
No, it doesn't really help you to understand things any better, and it doesn't really make sense if you take into consideration the movie. And then it doesn't even really tell you 3 days earlier or whatever.
No.
You're just
You have
thrown
no
right
idea.
into the movie after that, and it's like, huh?
Yeah, I feel like more, even for this one scene, probably more was there and then it was cut or something, and now it really doesn't make sense.
Maybe. The one thing it does do is it sets up the concept that we're going to be dealing with magic,
Yeah.
which is fine, but that comes into play pretty early on.
Very early on.
Right. So I don't feel like I needed that to accept the idea that there was going to be magic in this movie, because that happens within like 20 minutes. So
maybe they're just letting people have an out if they don't want to deal with magic right at the get-go.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a strange choice
Yeah.
and one that I feel doesn't really work.
No.
But then what does work is we cut to our quote-unquote hero, Jack Burton, as played by the great Kurt Russell, who we have now spoken about many times. It's another one of his great iconic performances. He's clearly drawing heavily from the John Wayne persona.
Yes.
He's kind of doing a riff on it, but he's not really doing John Wayne specifically. He's kind of using the John Wayne persona to give you an idea of how this character sees himself, which I think is very clever, because he sees himself as the main guy and the hero, and he's really not. And that's what Kurt Russell said. That's how he described Jack Burton. He's like, Jack Burton is like a guy who thinks he's Indiana Jones, but he's not. He's the sidekick. And really, Dennis Dunn's character is the hero.
Yeah.
So I think it's a smart way to go to sort of craft a character.
Yeah, we meet Jack Burton, and he's a truck driver, and he's coming in, and it's in a storm, and you can tell he's in San Francisco because we get him crossing, a good shot of him crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, and he's talking on his CB radio. Hey, well, this is what Jack Burton thinks about this, and I'll tell you one thing. This is what you should do, and he's just got like very he's definitely doing a John Wayne thing. He's definitely very self-important. I mean, he's charming because it's Kurt Russell, but yeah, he's you can already tell we're dealing with a character here.
Yeah, it's a very quotable role. I'm ashamed to admit, even though I've seen the movie now probably 10 times, I can't quote him exactly. I'm sure there are people who could easily rattle off his quotes. I know he says like, "Yes, sir, the check is in the mail."
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the things I remember from what he says in that opening monologue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't quote him either. I'm sure our pal Robert can.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't stick with me, but it's a lot of, I mean, he actually, just because we recently watched Army of Darkness, it's a lot of Ash in there. I feel like characteristics.
It's bluster and bravado,
Yeah.
without really having the
Can't back it up.
yeah, the necessary qualities to back it up. Like with Ash, you get the sense that he's physically capable, but with Jack, it's almost questionable if he's even physically up to the challenge. He does execute some moves here and there, and apparently Kurt Russell like worked out and stuff.
Yeah, he did like a lot of running and training and weightlifting.
He looks the part. He
No,
looks
the
like
part.
a leading man.
No, he looks the part, and he's not a coward or anything. I mean, like he should, he's ready to show up, but he doesn't have the skills.
Because he's being thrust into this world of like martial arts where people are like highly skilled.
Yeah.
And he really can't measure up to any of them. So yeah, we get our introduction of Jack Burton as a truck driver. We were sort of horrified to realize this time that it looks like he's carrying pigs to slaughter into San Francisco Chinese wet markets, which isn't an idea that's aged well in 2021, perhaps. I guess I should have understood that from the title of the name of his truck.
The Pork Chop Express.
Right. You would have thought that I could have
Well,
put
and
that
same
together.
here, because again, I've seen this a dozen times, and it's just today I was like, I think he's transporting pigs.
Yeah.
And I was just like, my heart just like sunk, and I was like, oh, Jack.
That makes sense. He ends up in this.
Yeah, in the wet market where they have all the live animals, and it's,
Yeah.
It totally tracks.
It's 2 and 2 I never put in together until today because we were watching this so actively. I will say this. I have never really watched this movie that actively. It's a movie that I can put on and enjoy, and it just kind of rolls by, and I'm always enjoying what I'm seeing. But this was the first time I really was like, okay, I need to pay attention to like how things happen, why things happen. It was like the first time I've ever done that.
Same, 100% same. No, I've seen this so many times over the years, starting from whenever it aired, probably in starting on cable probably back in 87 or so, whatever. I can't remember when it came out. The movie came out in 86, but I don't know when it showed up on TV.
87's a good guess.
Probably, yeah. And so many times since then, but like that, when you're catching things on TV too, as it was back then, it's like you catch them when you catch them. So there's like certain parts of the film that I feel like I've seen a lot. And then there's certain parts that, like, I kind of felt newer to me, because I'm like, oh, I'm really paying attention this time. Because for me, it's the same thing. It's a very passive film. It's an enjoyable film, but I can like be doing other things.
Yeah.
And just kind of pick it up here and there. And I know what the end result is. And, it's just a fun time.
Yeah.
But today, I was locked in today.
And it can be even challenging when you're really paying attention.
Yeah.
So what happens is Jack pulls into San Francisco and meets his good buddy Wang. Just get that childish giggle out of the way.
Forever 12.
His name is Wang, played by Dennis Dunn.
Yep.
And Jack and Wang are good friends. Jack likes to gamble with Wang and his buddies, his drinking buddies at the wet market. And Jack has a good night. He wins a bunch of money, and then Wang goes double or nothing. Or he goes nothing or double, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And he tries to cut this beer bottle in half with a blade that he has, and he is unable to do it. So now he owes Jack twice as much money, and he doesn't have it on him. So he's like, okay, you got to come with me into town to my restaurant so I can get you the money.
Important thing that happens here, too, is when he says he's going to cut the bottle. First, Jack is like, yeah, but you're going to cut my bottle, and so he finishes his beer and gives him his beer bottle because he's suspect that maybe it's a trick or something like that. And when he fails at cutting the bottle goes flying at Jack's face, and he reaches up quickly and catches it. And it's all in the reflexes.
Right. He says that, too, in the beginning in the truck while he's talking on the CB. He's like, my first wife said something, but I say it's all, she's like, don't drink and drive or whatever, or don't like drive too late. And it's all in the reflex, baby, or whatever. Yeah. So it's all in the reflexes is a Chekhov's phrase where it's going to come back and mean something. But yeah, he catches the bottle with his reflexes.
That's right.
And so on the way into town, Wang has to stop by the airport to pick up his Chinese bride who is arriving. She is a Chinese girl with green eyes, which is very unusual for Chinese girls. They've been sweethearts since they were kids in China. She's finally moving here because he saved up enough money or whatever. Yep. So they're going to pick her up at the airport. And while they're on their way there, Wang says, oh, that must be why I wasn't able to cut the bottle, because my mind and my spirit are going in different directions. Yep. So we're getting a little bit of mysticism here. But I do want to say that I really like the portrayal Dennis Dunn does of Wang. He's a very relatable, not in any way cliche kind of Chinese character. I think it's a positive portrayal, especially in the not so progressive 80s.
I think so too. I really like the portrayal. I really like the character. Wang's great.
It's a very endearing performance.
Apparently, John Carpenter had wanted Jackie Chan.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, I think that Dennis is great.
Yeah, he is great.
He is great, but I mean, I could see Jackie Chan doing that.
Well, you know what, actually, though? I would say that Jackie Chan, although he would have been amazing physically, it would have been a different conversation we'd be having right now, because Jackie, as amazing and as talented as he is, he doesn't speak English that great.
Yeah,
even in the Rush Hour movies, which I watched all of them recently, he does a great job, and all credit to him. I couldn't speak Chinese to save my life, so I'm not trying to diminish him in any way. But in those movies, he doesn't speak perfect English.
No, and I mean that's actually written into the movie, though. It's part of Rush Hour is like that English is his second language. Right.
I'm just saying that I think what I like about the character of Wang is that he speaks perfect English. Yeah. He's not, there's no sort of other-ishness to him. The fact that he's Chinese is addressed and is part of his character. It's a very important part of his character, but it's not, what a culture difference we have, which the Rush Hour movies are all
Well,
about
that's
that.
all it is between him and Chris Tucker is just like how opposite they are and,
Yeah.
you know, how different they have grown up and, you know, things like that. Whereas, like, well, I mean, Kurt Russell even says, when they're playing cards. He was like, you know, I consider you a friend or a brother or something like that. He was like, you know, aside from having an ethnic difference, you know, we're both Californians, you
Yeah.
know, and he's really he sees him as like, and I don't want to say as an equal because that sounds shitty. That's not what I mean. But you know, he sees him as very relatable, I
Right.
guess, someone he relates to, even though they're not of the same race or whatever.
So they end up in the airport, and here's another part where I'm going to kind of give the movie a little bit of a hard time because this whole setup is just weird. So Wang's going to get his green-eyed bride.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But then we also have the character of Kim Cattrall introduced, Gracie Law, who is an attorney.
I know. Gracie Law, the attorney. I know. It's so great. Okay.
And she is there to pick up a different Chinese girl who's arriving, who doesn't figure into the story at all.
No.
But Gracie Law also has green eyes,
Yep.
which is very obvious. Like Kim Cattrall, I'm not sure what eye color she really has. I think there's blue or...
I'm not sure. She doesn't have green eyes regularly?
No, it's definitely she's wearing contact lenses.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't remember what color her eyes are.
She either is brown or blue, but you know, her eyes are very clearly green. They're setting up this idea
Right,
that
the
there's
girl with the green eyes.
the girl with the green eyes, but all of that doesn't totally work for me because the whole point is it's special for a Chinese girl to have green eyes. So for a white girl to have green eyes isn't some exotic special thing.
Especially if you're blonde. No.
Right. So on top of that, there are these amazingly costumed Asian gang members
Toughs.
who have some of the most silliest sunglasses I've seen in an 80s movie, and that's saying something.
It's such ridiculous, like, we're bad guys outfits. And it's so, yeah, it's super 80s, just these ridiculous shades. The shirts they have on. One guy has a shirt on that says, like, #1. The costuming is it's cartoonish.
It's like cartoonish punk rock or something.
Exactly. It looks like when, like, someone who has no idea what punk rock is like, we're going to have punks in this.
So they are there just to randomly kidnap cute Asian girls?
Well, I mean, maybe, but I think they're there because they kind of say it in passing later that, like, it wasn't something that was directed by Lopan or whatever.
Yeah.
It was just like they were there just to screw around and just like be menaces or something because they're this bad gang or whatever. I can't remember what the gang's name is. Something like Dragon something or another, or
let's not even bother
Demon,
trying to.
something.
There's a lot of names. Let's just put it up front here. If you're a huge Big Trouble in Little China fan and it's going to annoy you that we don't have all of the names of everything committed to memory, we apologize.
Yes.
Definitely not going to hit all those names.
No, not at all.
You may want to lower that expectation of us.
Get it low
as you're listening.
Take it down low.
It's a gang.
It's a gang and it's a bad gang.
They're bad and I don't know what their name is. And it's funny because every time I watch this movie, I just assume they're working for Lopan because they kidnap Wang's lady.
Mei Lin.
But that's not where they're taking her, as we will find out.
Yeah, it was clear on this viewing for sure that they were not working for Lopan. I mean, I think because they're bad, like they probably do stuff for him at other times.
Sure.
But this particular thing was like on their own. This wasn't from him.
There's a lot of sort of politics hinted at among the Chinese gangs and stuff in this movie, and I definitely don't have it all worked out. So let's just forgive ourselves of that, because I know at certain points it's discussed, and it's just like, I can never truly follow it. Mei Lin is captured. They go on this chase after her into the garage, but the Asian gang gets away with her.
Well, in the meantime, too, you brought this up. It's like we meet Kim Cattrall. Wang is like, because Wang's looking for, I think it's Mei Lin is her name.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
No,
okay,
that's right, yeah.
I think it also means, I was looking it up, it means cat-like, which is interesting. That's what
She does look cat-like.
Right? Well, especially having the green eyes too, you know? Yeah, so that's how we're introduced to her. And so Wang's looking for his girl at the airport. And that's when Jack spots Gracie. Wang says she has green eyes, and Jack's like, how can you tell from here? Because he thinks he's talking about Kim Cattrall.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh no. And he's like, not her. She's trouble.
Yeah.
So like it's established that Wang knows who Gracie is. But Gracie's there to pick up this other girl, Tara, or something like that her name is, who I feel like also gets kind of manhandled by this group of toughs, but they're not taking her. She's just like, it's like a big kerfuffle. I don't know. There's stuff going on. It makes no sense. Like they're just both there picking up Chinese girls for different reasons.
Yes. And then a gang swoops in and kidnaps one of them.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's all I think you really need to know, but it's certainly not
airtight.
I feel like you could clean up a lot of this and just get to the point quicker. There's a lot of things in this movie that just feel overcomplicated. Even in terms of characters, I feel like we kind of have too many characters when it gets into the main action of it, but I'll talk about it when I get there.
Another thing, too, just to comment on, is because there's many people who probably have watched this movie now at this point or are fans of this who didn't know that you used to be able to go to an airport like that.
Right.
You know, it's like it's still, I mean, it's been 20 some odd years, you know, but it's still like it's weird. It's just so not the way things are anymore. No. And also to see like how they just like take off through like these emergency doors and are like running out of the airport and stuff.
I think it was probably not quite that loose even then.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little looser, but not that loose. Yeah.
So after that, they go back to, they go to Chinatown, and we're introduced to Egg Chen in the movie, even though we've already met him. But he's driving his tour bus, and we're seeing him do a tour through the city, establishing himself as a quirky, interesting character.
I think we also need to take a moment here to recognize that we're getting around San Francisco in Jack's 18-wheeler.
Right.
Now, granted, he's offloaded his cargo, but he still has this giant cab, and it's, you know, it's an 18-wheeler.
Right.
And it's been, I mean, if you've driven or seen San Francisco before, I mean, I had trouble navigating it when I had a Honda Accord.
Well, and it gets even crazier than that, because they're driving down the street, and then Wang's like, turn right here, turn right here. And he almost hits Egg Shen's bus.
Right.
And then he turns into this tiny little alleyway and then drives through the alleyway. And then we're in this like alleyway set. And it's a really funny scene because we're going into our first kind of action scene, but our main characters do not participate in this action scene.
Nope.
They remain in this truck. And first we see a funeral procession by a group of Chinese, I don't want to call them a gang, but they're like a group. We're all wearing similar clothes.
Yeah. And they have a name. And again, forgive us, we can't remember what it is.
I don't remember what their name is.
But they seem to be, well, I do know, I remember Wang says they're good guys.
Yeah, he says they're good guys. They're wearing yellow and like white. Yeah, they've got like white headbands.
Yeah.
Wang clearly delineates them as the good guys.
Yes.
And they are carrying a coffin.
Yeah, and like a big like portrait of the person who's died.
Yes, it's like a Chinese funeral
procession.
Procession. And then in the opposite direction comes another gang, and Jack says like, what about these guys with red turbans or whatever? Like some of them have red turbans, but they basically have black and red outfits. So we've got clearly color-coded white and gold and black and red. One of the guys in that gang is another famous Chinese actor who shows up in a lot of movies. The guy with long hair.
Yeah.
I think it's Jeff Amada. He's just somebody who you see in a lot of movies, but he's not really a character. He's just one of the gang members here. So these two gangs face off against each other, and like Wang even says like, we've got like a Chinese standoff here or whatever. And then we get a big martial arts street battle. I'm of two minds, because on one hand I appreciate the action going on, and I appreciate that John Carpenter is trying his hand at a martial arts action movie, which is clearly what he wants to do. However, I think that his action filmmaking here is just okay. Considering it's supposed to be martial arts, it's not super spectacular, especially in this first fight. People are doing what they're supposed to be doing and kicking and punching and doing all that stuff, but I'm not blown away. Like, I'll use the example of when Quentin Tarantino decided to take on martial arts and do Kill Bill Part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you think of that movie, that House of Blue Leaves fight sequence is amazing.
Yeah.
He really studied martial arts cinema, and he really got a really amazing 20 minutes of fight choreography. And he obviously worked with great choreographers and all that. But here I don't feel like Carpenter is really rising to the challenge of martial arts fight. Like, no martial arts fight fan is going to look at this movie and go, oh yeah, great martial arts fights.
Well, I mean, sorry to jump ahead, but I will say the martial arts fight at the end,
it's better, for sure.
Way better.
Yes.
And I mean, sure, Carpenter could have put a little bit more into this, but I kind of feel like there's just so much going on in this film.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised, neither am I let down that it's not that great. I'm like, it's fine because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I
hear what you're saying. I'm not
considering it's supposed to be a martial arts film to some degree. The actual martial arts fighting is just okay. And especially,
I would never consider this is supposed to be a martial arts film.
Well, I mean, that's part of what's going on, for sure.
I think actually, as I was watching this today, again, with like really razor sharp focus, I was thinking to myself, what is this film supposed to be? Martial arts did not come to mind, but I mean, it does play heavily throughout it, but I was thinking like, it's kind of Indiana Jones horror, Chinese mysticism.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I think you could argue that whatever this movie is, they didn't quite crack it.
Well, no, or I mean, or know how to get it marketed properly or something. I mean, whatever. But anyway, this is just the thought. I'm just telling you. I was watching it earlier today, and I'm thinking like, how would I describe this to somebody?
Do you think that might have maybe played into why it didn't do so well?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might have, Sebby.
Well, let me move on from being a little harsh on this initial fight to my delight when the characters known as the Three Storms show up.
Yes.
These are wizards or some sort of supernatural beings that literally come floating out of the sky, and they have like superpowers, basically.
Yep.
They're awesome costumed characters. They've got these cool bamboo hats, and if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, the game or the movies, the character of Raiden in the Mortal Kombat game was heavily influenced from these characters.
Well, I think these characters are also influenced from actual like Chinese folklore or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But specifically the guy that can kind of harness lightning and shoot lightning. His name is Lightning, I believe.
Yeah. Well, there's also Thunder is another
Thunder,
one. Yeah.
That is directly plagiarized in Mortal Kombat.
Cool.
Like, these guys show up and they start just wreaking havoc with their superpowers and their fighting abilities. I will say this as a sort of compliment to counteract my negative comment. I feel like the special effects in this movie for the mid-'80s are good.
I agree.
Like, they hold up. Like, even some of this weird stuff we see later, I feel like the special effects work here is strong.
I 100% agree, because we're not too far away from turning the corner to really bad special effects that are coming like in the early 90s too. So for this time, absolutely. I think the effects are great.
Yeah, I'll take these sort of goofy 80s well done special effects over bad 90s poorly done special effects.
Lawnmower Man.
That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so the Three Storms show up. They start using their powers. And one thing that's a little confusing is we're later going to learn that they are the agents of Lo Pan. In fact, we're going to see Lo Pan for the first time in a matter of moments. But they seem to be going after both of the gangs, and one of the gangs is on Lo Pan's side, the bad guys.
Yep.
When I was watching it this time, I'm like, okay, so are these gangs neither gang related to Lo Pan? But no, the black and red gang, they're Lo Pan's guys.
Well, because all bad things are going to be going to Big Bad Lo Pan.
So it's a little inconsiderate of Lo Pan to unleash his magical warriors on his own people.
That's Lo Pan.
Yeah, so the three storms are there and they're fighting and we're getting special effects stuff and they're flying through the air and doing wire work and stuff, and that's all fun. And Jack is trying to get his truck out of this cramped alleyway, and he starts driving towards this...
Well, he's driving towards the storms.
The storms, yeah.
The thunder, lightning, and the other guy.
Yeah. And then this ghastly sort of tall Asian man appears in like white makeup and a crazy headdress and a robe and everything.
Like an emperor or something.
Yeah, he looks like a undead emperor.
Yes.
And this is the character of Lo Pan, or at least his spiritual incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack runs him over with the truck. And then he backs up, and then Lo Pan is still there.
Yes.
And that really freaks Jack out. I mean, he's freaked out already by the supernatural beings, but this really gets to him. And Lo Pan is our main villain.
Our big bad.
And he is played by the wonderful James Hong,
Yep.
who is probably one of the most well-known Chinese actors of the time. He shows up in almost every movie where there's Asians in the 80s and 90s. Great actor. And I will say this, over the many viewings of this film, every time I watch it, I love Lo Pan more and more.
Lo Pan's great, and Lo Pan has got jokes.
Yeah, he's hilarious.
I just love a good villain who like can just, because his humor, he's hilarious, but it's like it's very subtle, and it's like a lot of things that are like not very. It's just kind of you might not catch it on the first viewing of like some of the things he says, and just kind of some of his mannerisms and stuff.
Well, you're supposed to be really afraid of him because he's this super powered like sorcerer or something, but at the same time he's got this really strange sort of giddy he likes to giggle and sort of titter.
Yes.
And the delivery is just sort of quirky and fun.
Yeah.
Every time he's on screen, he's just so watchable and enjoyable. And I love both versions we get of him.
Yes.
I love this like 7-foot tall emperor demon or whatever he's supposed to be, and then I love later when we get his human form,
his 2,000-year-old human form that's like doesn't have flesh or whatever. It's like so gross.
Whatever form he's in, James Hong is a delight.
He sure is.
And he's one of the high points of this movie. Absolutely. I would say, for sure.
They go back to Wang's restaurant, and we're introduced to his uncle. I think that's when his friend Eddie shows up.
Yeah, Eddie's like works at the restaurant.
He's like the maitre d' and more or whatever. And he seems like he's a character and a good guy and knows what's going on. Like he already knows like everything that's happened.
Yeah.
Like not even hearing it from them.
Yeah.
Like here, like the word is out on the street. What happened? And Jack's like in like this Asian fancy robe.
Kimono type of robe. Yeah.
Is that then?
It's something like that.
Well, because I just remember him trying to call his insurance company to get his truck.
Right. Yes.
Oh, because that's right. Because they are running, because they leave his truck and they're running around and they go into this building with like some of the, for lack of a better term, the not bad gang, the good guys gang were like in there, and they like go through like garbage and stuff, and like are trying to escape because the bad guys are coming after them, and he gets kind of gross. Yes. So I think that would make sense why he's.
This is a perfect example of the sort of connective tissue between scenes that I always sort of forget about. Yeah, they go crawling through this like gross little crawl space full of garbage.
And then they're back at Wang's place.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jack's trying to like call in a claim for his truck, and he's like, having problems. Of course I don't know my insurance number. It's in the truck and and all this stuff. And then Gracie Law swoops in and what is she doing here? And so she's got the scoop that, Mei Lin was taken by accident. It wasn't part of Lo Pan's thing, by this gang who like kidnapped her from the airport, and they've just sold her off at the White Tiger, which is like a brothel.
It's a Chinese brothel.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say the thing about Wang's restaurant, and we're not even in the front of the restaurant.
Like the house, like kind of back of the
Yeah,
house,
like
but
the
like literally
kitchen or
like,
whatever.
well, yeah, but it kind of feels like there might be living quarters back
Sure.
there too or something. It doesn't feel like you're in a restaurant
We
at
never
all.
see the front of his restaurant as far as I'm concerned.
I
Or we don't see
think,
the dining room anyway.
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's kind of like a sitcom apartment
Yes.
because
Yes.
people are just
Coming
wandering
in.
in uninvited, don't knock. Gracie Law just shows up, doesn't knock.
It's very much like Seinfeld.
Yes.
Just coming into Jerry's. And it feels also too, like, it's funny because you say that, because I was kind of feeling like almost like it kind of is like a play at that
Yeah.
point too, where people just, because, and especially Kim Cattrall's like performance at that time, she's just kind of over the top as a character.
Yeah, she's doing that kind of heightened, almost like if she was doing a take on like a Lois Lane type of reporter character, which is confusing.
Yes.
Because she is not a reporter.
She's not the reporter.
She's a lawyer
Yes.
who's like advocating for like Chinese citizens'
Something
rights
like
or
that.
something.
Yeah.
And we're going to get a female
Yes.
reporter. We get this other character,
Margot.
played by an actor named Kate Burton, who I don't really know
I
from
don't know
anything.
from anything else. Yeah.
So we get this other character that is the reporter that's like working with Gracie, and the writer in me is just like, just make this one character.
Well, apparently Gracie has been working with Margot because she's been trying to get any member of the press interested in something that's been going on, like with Lo Pan or just
Sure.
like stuff going on in the Chinese community. And Margot's like this Berkeley beat reporter or something. Like, it's not even, she's not big time. She's just trying to get her big break.
Yeah, all of that is fine.
Yeah.
I still am like, just
Make her
this
one person.
character.
I know. I hear you.
This is the movie that we're getting, so I will put that aside. Yeah, so they figure out that Maylin has been taken to the White Tiger, so they've got to figure out a way to get in there, and so they devise this plan
Solid.
in which Jack is going to go up dressed as this sort of nerdy salesman or whatever who's looking for a green-eyed Chinese prostitute, I guess.
We've been calling her Maylin. It's Miao Yen.
Are you sure?
Yep.
All right, well, whatever. Miao Yen.
We're terrible with names. If one thing you can know for sure on Tentpole Trauma is that we're going to butcher a name.
This isn't the first time. We called the character in Flash Gordon, that's Kaya, the whole podcast.
I know.
Which I'm sure somebody was like
Someone
screaming.
hates us so much out there for that. I'm sorry.
We're imperfect beings.
Miao Yen, which makes sense that would be cat-like because it kind of sounds like meow, right?
Right. Well, you caught it, and now we've corrected it.
I caught it an hour in or whatever. I'm sorry, everyone, but yeah, it's not just names that have Chinese like relation to them. It's all names.
We screw up white people's names too.
All the time.
Okay, so they've got to go save Miao Yen from this brothel. So Jack has made himself up like a salesman or something.
And fun fact, I was reading in the trivia earlier about this getup, which I commented while we were watching this, that Kurt Russell, the way he looks at this point, looks like he did when he was doing Disney films. Is he's just like super kind of nerdy looking. So he has like this, like he looks like a salesman. Right, and he's got like these nerdy kind
Is
of
it his used cars outfit?
Yes.
Okay.
He used his outfit from Used Cars.
That makes sense. He totally looked like he looked in Used Cars.
Yeah, but except he don't think he had the glasses in Used Cars, did he?
He might have. We only saw Used Cars for the first time like a year ago.
Oh yeah, I thought that was funny. Anyway, so yeah, he's dressed in like his outfit from Used Cars and these big thick glasses. He's got his hair kind of slicked back. And off he goes off into the brothel, and he's going to try to get Miao Yen.
But he says to the madam, I want a Chinese girl with green eyes. And she's like, there are no Chinese girls with green eyes. And then so she just goes off to the room where Miao Yen is being kept and does not offer her up. And poor Miao Yen is just tied up. So Miao Yen is played by an actress named Susie Pei
something.
And it's a bit of a thankless role, I'm going to say, because she doesn't really even get a full line, I don't think, in the whole movie. We hear her sort of scream and say a few words here and there near the end, but she doesn't actually say anything for most of the movie at all. So it's a bit of a thankless role. She's very pretty, though.
Yes.
She's being tied up in this back room, and Jack is not given her, and he just has this awkward conversation with the prostitute he is given. But before anything too awkward can happen, there is a big green light in the sky, and the three storms come bursting in through the roof of the brothel and steal away Miao Yen. So now Lo Pan finally has Miao Yen in his grips. This whole thing has been just basically a side quest.
Well, and it felt like at first, because we also were in San Francisco, it seemed like it could be an earthquake when the big green thing opens. Another fun trivia fact for this scene is, because I did notice this as well, Kurt Russell's really sweaty in this scene. Apparently, he was suffering through a bad case of the flu at this time. So that sweat is real. That's from the flu.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I thought they just made him sweaty, or because it was raining outside too. So I wasn't sure what was going on, but he's definitely like glistening, but it's flu sweat.
Well, it looks good on screen.
I know, sure does.
He suffered for his art.
He suffered for us.
Okay, so here's where things start to get a little bit hazy for me, even though we just watched the movie a second time less than an hour ago. They've lost Miao Yen. They regroup at the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty funny scene just in the sense that we get a lot of exposition here from both Gracie and the Margot character, and it's done in the most sort of like obvious way. They're like, "Oh, you mean so-and-so imports, the home of the most dangerous Chinese gang in all of Chinatown?" Like, they both have lines that are just obvious exposition lines, but it's almost like they're doing it satirically because they know they have to
get it out.
Yes, like it feels tongue-in-cheek because it's so obvious. Or maybe I'm just reacting to something that was a normal thing to do in the 80s, and I'm think that they're doing it intentionally when they weren't.
I don't. It feels like they are.
Yeah.
It feels like it's tongue in cheek a little bit.
So they basically figure out they've got to go to like Wing Something Imports, which is owned by David Lo Pan, the human version of Lo Pan. Jack and Wang like sneak their way in as like repairmen or something.
Yes, telephone repairman, I believe, because he's like Kurt Russell's carrying a phone, like an actual like rotary phone in his hand.
Yeah, and they sneak their way in, and this is where they end up captured and kept in this room where they're blindfolded. The guy who plays Thunder susses them out. He figures out that they're not who they say they are or whatever.
Well, they go into an elevator, and I mean, there's cameras everywhere. They figured out who they are. The elevator fills up with salt water.
That's right, yeah.
So they're like, they're forced to like open the doors and swim out, and there's like all these dead bodies.
That's a cool shot.
It's a really cool shot. There's a lot of like dead bodies that are like chained in this room. And yeah, they end up getting captured, I believe, by Thunder.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they're tied up and blindfolded, but somehow Jack's able to remove his stuff. I don't know how he's undone himself or whatever, but when Thunder comes back, he's like putting his stuff back on, and he also has his knife, like I think in his boot or something like that. So then he tries to attack Thunder, and it goes poorly. And luckily, Wang is way more skilled of a fighter. So he kind of like at least gets Jack to have another chance to like get a knife up against Thunder's neck.
Yeah.
And then Eddie is there too, because
Thunder has brought in Eddie and Gracie and Margot
came in after. They were like we saw them on the TV screen or whatever.
And they've all been captured now too.
Yeah, I just watched this too, and I'm like, wait, I think they had already gone like in their like kind of makeshift wheelchairs to meet Lo Pan. That already happened, because then they saw the TV screens, and that's when they saw Margot and Gracie and Eddie coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, something happened. I don't know. Forgive us. They somehow went and are meeting with, they meet Lo Pan, very old Lo Pan. This is like a Lo Pan with not his skin.
Yeah.
And he's like gross in the best way, like just liver spots, and just kind of reminds me of Nothing But Trouble, kind of a little bit.
Well, and he's explaining that he needs the Chinese girl. The blood of the Chinese girl is going to let him have his body back again.
Well, because he has to marry her and then sacrifice her to the demon god that of
Right.
the East or something that he worships.
Right. He sold his soul to or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So that's what's going on there. And he's trying to like get information out of Wang about his lady. And, you know, and poor Jack's like giving him shit. And he was like, why don't you ask her, Lopan? You know, and just really like, this is a bunch of shit. And just, you know, just being Jack.
The Jack sort of bravado.
Yeah.
And, you know, he loves to say stuff like, well, you know what Jack Burton would say.
Yeah.
Like, or whatever.
So all that's happening. Lopan looks over to, like, he has multiple TVs throughout the place, and that's what he was like, who are these people? This is
this really ticks me off, or something he says.
Yeah. Another really funny Lopan moment, because he's just such a great little creep. So yeah, then somehow it's Jack and Wang and Eddie all in this like holding area, and the ladies have been taken to another place.
Yeah, and we get a comical moment where Jack is on this wheelchair thing, and he ends up like rolling down like this ramp backwards down a ramp, and he almost goes into this like well, but he's just teetering on the edge. He's hanging on the edge. A lot of comical sort of hijinks. Let's forgive ourselves if we get things out of sequence here, because I feel it's really hard to keep these events in sequence. We'll just speak about the things that happen, and we'll enjoy them, and it won't really matter in what order they happened. How about that?
We'll just enjoy the ride.
If you're really pedantic about this movie and you really want to hear it spoken in perfect chronological order, we apologize. But it's really hard to keep it in order in our brains.
On all of our socials.
Maybe it's our brains that's the problem.
Maybe it is.
But like, we are both sober as judges.
Totally.
We've watched
caffeinated,
and we still have trouble keeping it in our brains.
And big trouble keeping it in our brains.
So yeah, they've got to save Gracie and Margot, who are in this like penned area. And so the guys show up, and there's these women gang members
badasses
guarding the pen, and we get a fun fight on this like bridge over a warehouse space, and Jack has to sneak into where the pens are, and he's like climbing on top of the pens, and he finds Margot, and she's like, are you gonna save us or something? And he's like, I have no idea.
Which is like probably the most honest Jack Burton moment in the entire film.
He's not even certain he's going to be able to do that. No. The women fighters are using like tonfas, which are these stick weapons that I really like. It's a fun scene.
And they even have like, at one point they like kind of open them up and like some like powder gas comes out.
Mm-hmm. But the heroes prevail, and they rescue all the women that are penned up, which is cool. And that's something that I actually, for better or for worse, I know there's like a gazillion people in this film, but I do appreciate that it's like they did the right thing. They broke all of these poor women out of these cages, and they're like getting everybody out. There's definitely a sort of human trafficking element to this that is maybe a little uncomfortable in the modern age, just in the sense that I think they were sort of playing it for laughs back then, and I don't think anybody would find that terribly funny anymore. It's not really funny to see women in cages. No. But anyway, it's not a huge part of the movie. No, not at all. But they do get everybody out. Yes. And then they jump into this like questionable pool that's like kind of greenish looking. Yeah. And like everybody's just, because they're being chased. And so they just all, like these scantily clad women, also like in like their like 90s or whatever. The whole gang is there. Margot and Gracie and Eddie and Wang and Jack. And this whole, there's a scene. So like everybody's jumping in and they're swimming through this like pipe. And there's this scene where when this is happening where, you know, Kim Cattrall gets through and Gracie gets through, and like she keeps pulling people up, and she's like, so-and-so, and then it's like, where's so-and-so? And I don't know, because everyone's just trying to swim along, and then she'll be like, where's Wang? I don't know. And then the next person will be Wang, and she'll be like, where's Jack? I don't know. And then the next person's Jack. And then she and Jack make out. Right. And he's like, why do you have to be so close to me, or making it hard for me to concentrate or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, we're establishing the sort of will they, won't they romance between Jack and Gracie, which isn't really a big part of the movie and doesn't come to much, but it's fun. It's fun. It's really fun. You know, I appreciate where it goes or where it doesn't go, I guess. And I find Kurt Russell and Kim Cattrall very attractive, so I don't have any problem with them as a couple. I think they're a cute couple.
They're a cute couple, and they remind me of Harrison Ford and Kate Capshaw, but are more likable. I mean, I love Harrison Ford, but Kate Capshaw's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And
Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom.
Oh, Gracie Law is nowhere near as annoying as
Not
Willie
at all,
Scott.
but there's kind of a similar, like dynamic between them.
Oh, I absolutely see what you're saying. But yeah, Kim Cattrall's character is so much less grating.
No, of course. And she's way more independent and can take care of herself and isn't so but that's Kate Capshaw's character, and that is where she's like, I'm this actress, and like, help me.
Side note, I love Kim Cattrall. She's not in the new Sex and the City, so I say fuck that.
And I say ditto.
Yeah.
Because without Samantha, who cares?
Exactly. So, yeah, they swim through this gross tunnel. And
they
then
get out. They're in, like, the sewer system.
Yes.
So they figure out, like, Wang alerts them to this. He was like, we're in, like, this is where the fresh water comes in. This is where the seawater comes in. He's like, I think that's where we came in, up there. So Kurt Russell climbs up. And then everybody's, like, all of a sudden up, which is fine. I don't need to see everybody climbing the ladder. But that was a lot of people to get up quickly. But that's fine. And then he's like, yeah, this is where we came in. And he was like, there should be offices on the other side of this door. It's going to seem very normal. Because that is where they came in. There was, like, a security desk. And, it's like a business front. And he opens the door and there's like all these big bads there, this gang. And he's like, shit. And he's like, closes the door and he's like, we can't go through here. And he's like, they only saw me, everybody hide. So they start like, and then of course our real hero, Wang, is like, I'll fight with you, two of us against the world type thing, Jack. And so he's there. And then, like, Jack's trying to, like, get his gun to work or get his knife or something. Like, he's totally futzing around. First, I think he does shoot everybody, but then his gun, like, stops working or something. And then, like, Wang proceeds to, like, kick everybody's ass.
Yeah.
While Jack's, like, trying to, like, get his shit together.
Is this the first time Jack shoots somebody and they're like, is that the first time you ever capped someone?
I think that's what Eddie says.
Yeah.
And he's like, of course not.
Yeah.
But it is.
You can tell it is.
It is.
He's shocked that he shot somebody.
But then, like, he drops his gun or something. He's fumbling. He's doing his, like, fumbling deal. And he's, like, so not present. And it's just Wang, like, kicking everyone's ass.
Yeah.
Being the hero. Anyway, they get out. I think Egg's bus is outside.
Right. Yep.
So they're getting out into the bus, except we see like there's some sort of Asian statue or something.
Yeah, against
like,
the wall.
Against the wall that has like doing that thing where the eyes change out,
Yep.
like, and like how it does with paintings or whatever in
Right.
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
and the eyes change to like these weird orange eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So then Kim Cattrall, Gracie, like leans in, and then we see her grabbed by these not human arms.
Yeah, it's like this creature that there's a monster that just seems to be roaming free in Lopan's lair.
Yeah, he's like a cross of some sort of like Sasquatch kind of looking thing, but then also kind of reminds me of in the segment of Creepshow?
Oh, the Crate.
The Crate, kind of like a little bit.
You know what else he kind of reminds me of, which came out around the same time, is the Creatures in Fright Night. He's got like a big smiley kind of
the big
mouth.
Yeah.
But he looks like kind of like an orangutan,
Yeah.
but with like a monster face. Like he's like some sort of demon.
Yeah.
We're never really given
Not
a
really
solid
sure what he is, but he's
explanation.
orange.
He's orange and he's a monster.
Kind of hairy, and he's got like this,
For an 80s creature suit monster, I think he's great.
I think he's totally great.
Yeah, like he's fun to look at and he's scary. I don't fully understand his place in the story,
but I just know we're dealing with weird shit.
Right.
Like, and anything can happen here. So she gets snatched by him, but nobody notices because it's all chaos and everybody's just trying to get on Egg's bus to get out. And that's when, he's like, we got out. And they were like, where's Miao Yen? And Wang's like, we didn't get her. And then like, Jack's like, where's Gracie? Cut to Gracie getting dragged away by this thing.
Yeah. So this whole mission has been a failure.
Yeah.
They have not only did they not get Miao Yen, but they lost Gracie. So not very successful.
Nope.
So then they regroup again, right?
I think you'll have something to say about this as a writer, because as a viewer who's not a writer, I don't really like going back to the same place.
Yeah. it becomes a sort of thing that is hard to avoid, especially when you have only so much money and you have to kind of keep things locked down to as few sets as you can manage. It's a budget restrictions thing usually. It's why sitcoms always revolve around the same three places. It's why horror movies do so well when they're single location, because it's just cheaper. It's just the way to keep things inexpensive.
And which is fine, but it's the fact that we have to go back there is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I do appreciate that at least when we go back there this time, we take a different route to get there. We go underground,
Right.
like up Chinatown, and go through that whole like spooky, like there's a random monster in there too, because they do the whole suit up with Egg, and he has like a whole crew, and
Yeah.
they go to Egg's place, and he owns like the whole block or something, Wang Sane, and he's got like all kinds of like sorcery type things happening in there, and he's getting his stuff together and takes them in through his place. There's like like a pole that slides down.
Right, it's like a fireman's pole.
That like slides down into what seems like the sewer system, but it's just the underground of Chinatown. But it's like, yeah, it's super creepy, and I like the way it looks. And there's like, it's like this black water or whatever. It's like bubbling, and there's a lot of like smoke and smog, and very cavernous looking.
Yeah.
And then one of the guys even gets snatched by a monster that comes out of the wall.
Right, that giant fish creature-y type of thing.
Yeah.
And like Jack's like, what is that? What is that? Yeah.
Yeah, because Jack wasn't ready for that. None of it. Yeah, and they're just like, this is just what happens in Chinatown.
Right.
And Egg also has like these magic marbles or something that he throws.
They're like magic grenades or something.
Yeah. So yeah, I do appreciate that they are going to a different place. I wouldn't mind if they never left that place. It's the fact that like, I think it's even more just because I'm like, I don't want to fucking go back there. Like, we just barely got out of there. I know we got to go back and help our friends, but this sucks. I like, what you're getting into, I think is what it is.
What it does is it creates a feeling of that you're not really moving forward. I think that's what you're reacting to.
That's probably what it is.
It creates that feeling where it's hard to put it into chronological order too, because you're like, is this the part when was this after when they go back? And okay, now they've gone back. And and the poor like older uncle character is just hanging out at the restaurant, like parsing out wisdom or whatever. And at one point, like him and Egg are like having a conversation where they're talking about Lopan and his history, and they're filling in the sort of magical backstory elements. But you feel like at that point, you're like, I know everything I need to know. I don't need to just kind of be coming back here.
And we should also say that Eddie and Margot stay behind.
And there's sort of a hinted little romance
there too, yeah.
So now we're heading into our climax, and what's going on here is that Lopan, because they both have green eyes, he figures, well, why don't I marry both of them? And there's this weird sort of scene where the three storms all perform these sort of martial arts moves in front of them, and then they take this sword that's glowing or something, and both Gracie and Mao Yen, who seem to be sort of entranced and don't have a will of their own at this point, grab onto the sword, and then the sword is lifted up to the ceiling.
Yes.
And it does something on...
then they touch like this, what looks like a light bulb or something above the ceiling, but it has like green eyes.
Yes, and it lights up
when they touch it. And the sword is supposed to be like heated sword or something like that.
Yeah.
And they like, the test is, could they hang on to it?
Right.
And they both do. So that's when he's like, I'm marrying them both.
Right.
But his plan is to, because he's got to still sacrifice someone to the demon god.
Yeah.
So he's going to sacrifice Gracie and then keep Miao Yen for all of his earthly pleasures or something like that. Something gross. That's what's happening there. So he's decided, he tells the storms that they need to prepare them for the wedding ceremony.
And so the wedding ceremony is taking place in this awesome sort of big set that's got all this cool sort of big dragon statues and a big skull podium or like that they're on.
Yeah, they come through like the mouth of a skull or something. It's great. Like, this is like, if I was thinking as I was watching this today, I'm like, this is what you put your money into. Like,
Yeah.
this is great. This whole set is really fun.
It's so perfectly 80s too, because there's this sort of twin runner of neon
Yeah.
that's like around the edge.
And around the skull.
Right.
Yeah.
Which looks great.
Yeah, it's like this green
makes
neon.
no sense, but it looks
Who
awesome.
cares?
It's a real strength of 80s sort of fantasy stuff that this was before we got really pedantic about having to have everything be totally logical and based in reality. So sets like this would just be crazy, and there would be things in them that, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Why would they have this in here or whatever? But who cares? It looks awesome.
And I feel like this part of the movie and this set in particular, when we were talking earlier about there being a music video, I feel like this is what's in it, because it looks like what would be in a music video.
Looks like Motley Crue should be like playing on a stage. They even had a video.
They did, the Too Young to Fall in Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should totally be playing on stage at the wedding. Oh, we forgot, before they enter into this very cool room where the ceremony's like taking place and all the baddies are there like for the ceremony, is that Egg has everybody take a drink. He brought like this special like flask of, we don't really know what it is, but it's something special that, and I thought it was really cute that like whatever room they're in, Egg gets behind the bar.
I loved that.
I do too.
That was something that I really appreciated on this watch, just that strange little scene. It was like moments like that this time I enjoyed the most, where I was like, this is quirky and weird, and I'm just appreciating that this is in the movie. And I feel like those moments are the type of things that makes this movie so beloved to people.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, a big part of that is Kurt Russell's performance, because it's so quirky and unusual, and it's not what you're expecting it to be. I think that scene is indicative of a quality that the movie have that I think is really endearing to people and why they love it so much.
I love that scene. I think it's great. And they all like, so he's like playing bartender and he pours everybody like this smoky drink and everyone just, they just drink it. Then they show the next scene as they're
in this elevator that only goes down, and they're all like, oh yeah, I feel really good.
I feel kind of invincible.
Yeah.
And they're all just like smiling, and it's just, it's that whole sequence is great.
Well, he says like you'll be able to see and do things
that no one else can see or whatever. Oh, and we also didn't mention how did we leave out the gross blob of eyeballs that's like floating around following them.
Well, that shows up around this time.
Well, it's before they get have their drinks. Like they whatever, who cares, it's fine. This thing that's like just all eyeballs is levitating, has a mouth, but there's like an eye in there too, is like whatever this thing sees, Lopan sees.
Yeah, it's like the way he can keep track of it's like he calls it the Watcher.
Yeah, the Watcher.
Couple of things about this creature. First of all, I think it looks really good.
Oh, it's awesome.
It reminds me a bit of the Slimer from Ghostbusters.
100%.
It has that kind of vibe. Also, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, there's a type of monster called the Beholder, which looks exactly like that. I have to believe that whoever designed that monster played D&D, because it's called the Beholder and this is called the Watcher. Like, it's like they're just trying not to get sued, and it looks almost exactly the same. Only the Watcher's a little more comedic looking.
But I appreciate about that. That's kind of the other monster that we couldn't define what it was either. All the monsters are kind of comic-y in this, and that's fun about it.
It's Ghostbusters-y.
Yeah, very Ghostbusters-y.
It feels like they're taking a page from Ghostbusters, where it's like, we want to have monsters and things that are scary, but they're not really going to be scary. They're going to be kind of cute and fun.
It's PG-13, and it falls perfectly in that rating.
So we get into the big fight in the wedding ceremony.
We have to mention that Egg is telling everybody to because they just want to go in and get Lopan, but he's like, wait, we have to wait till the ceremony's done so he'll be human again.
Right, because he's going to become basically corporeal, and they'll be able to kill him because he's in his form he can't touch things. There's a scene where he goes and he tries to touch Mao Yin, and he can't because he doesn't have physical form.
Right.
And he's like, oh, I long to touch you, or whatever.
He
whatever
only
he's
has
talking about.
physical form when he's like the decrepit old man with no skin.
Right. So yeah, they can't kill him until he's completed enough of the ceremony, which involves him like pricking their arms or whatever with his
love needle.
Yeah. So yeah, we get a big martial artsy type fight here, which is an improvement over the one in the alley, in my opinion.
I think so.
Most notably, Jack starts off the battle on the wrong foot because he's all excited and he shoots his gun in the air and it knocks a piece of cement off the ceiling or whatever, and it knocks him out.
Could that not be more American, by the way?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's so, like, America! Like, I'm gonna shoot the guns at the ceiling and the bricks, like, hit him on the head and knock him out. I mean, might as well had, like, little birds flying around his head for a minute because he's just, like, out for the count. Everyone runs into the fight and we just see Jack laying on the floor. And it just makes me laugh every time. It's just... He's such a great character.
You know what I was thinking this time is like, I think Game of Thrones copped this move. Remember the battle where Tyrion gets knocked out early in the battle and he like survives because he's unconscious the whole time?
Yes.
I think they took a page from Big Trouble in Little China. Yeah. Although Jack does get up and
he gets up and he gets back in the game. But
it's only for the first few minutes of the fight.
It's just funny at the first few minutes.
But, the thing that's sort of notable about this fight is the three storms are all there and they're using their powers, and Wang is sort of paired off against, I think it is Rain. And Rain is flying through the air and they're doing this like sword fighting through the air, and even though it's like a cheesy effect, you see stuntmen kind of flying through the air, but then they do the close-ups between them and you can see that they're just like lying on their sides or whatever and being pulled on a cart or something. But it's still a lot of fun. It's fun 80s special effects, and like Dennis Dunn is pulling off the sword fighting, and I mean, he's not doing all those crazy flips. His character is really acrobatic and will do like these backflips.
He did so many back handsprings like in a row. As someone who did gymnastics, good job, Wang.
Dennis Dunn did not execute those, as you'd probably guess, but they do look cool.
Yeah, he did, but he did some of it because in the trivia it was saying that he had dabbled in training as a kid and done some Chinese opera as an adult. So he was able to do some of it. I mean, he didn't do all of it, but it's really time for his character shines in this. Like, you really get to see him just flying through the air. And this is when, like, Carpenter's just like going all out at this point too. And I was reading this in the trivia too, where he was talking about, he was like pulling out all the stops. Like, he was like, had the trampolines and wires, where he worked with martial arts choreographer James Liu, who planned every scene in detail. Carpenter stated, I used every cheap gag, trampolines, wires, reverse movements, upside down sets. It was much like photographing a dance.
Cool.
Which is great. I don't really have a problem with the first one in the street or whatever. It's just kind of whatever.
I would just say it's underwhelming.
It isn't. It's just kind of, it just is just what's happening. But this end fight is like, wow. Like, I'm totally really impressed and really enjoying it. And it's just, you could tell he's just pulling out all the stops. So the ceremony's done. He's becoming more human. Like, we're seeing Lopan, like, he's like bleeding. He's like cutting his hand with he's got like these crazy long nails.
And he's excited that he's bleeding.
Yeah, because he's like, it's working. Yeah. It's working. And, Kim Cattrall is like snapped out of the trance or whatever.
Right. And she like pushes one of the guys that's near her over
and then she
thing.
Falls off of the platform or whatever too. And then like Kurt Russell is like fighting this, looks kind of like a knight, and he's got like Kurt Russell has this knife that was in his like leg, like in his like a holster, in his or something,
like boot moccasins that he wears.
Yeah, some sort of holster rig or something like that. And so this knight, like, he somehow like is able to have him, he kind of falls on it.
Yes.
But then he's dealing with like, he stabbed this, but it's more comedy because he's like, he can't do anything because this giant knight is like on top of him.
Yeah, he's not a knight, but he is armored and he's got this cool mask. Yeah. It's a really cool design character.
Knight's not the right word, but
heavily armored.
Heavily armored, yes.
Long story short, Jack rescues Gracie, or, well, she kind of rescues herself.
She rescues herself.
And she, the brides are dressed in these elaborate,
traditional looking Chinese like
Wedding
ceremony
dresses.
outfits or something. They're really pretty, but it's like it's a lot, and also the makeup and everything.
Yeah,
It's,
almost kabuki like.
yeah.
And if you've ever seen any sort of pictures or anything from this movie, if you're familiar with just the iconography of it, you always see Kim Cattrall in this final outfit.
Yeah.
And you see Jack in his jeans and his samurai sleeveless shirt or
Yeah.
whatever that he wears.
They escape to go up to like Lopan's office area
Yeah,
because
because Lopan escapes with
Miao Yan.
Miao Yan. And they're like, we have to go get Lopan.
Yeah.
And,
Well, first of all, he and Kim Cattrall like make out on the way up to the office.
Right,
And
in
this
the
is one of my
elevator.
favorite things because she has like all this really extravagant makeup on, including lipstick. And so she's making out with him. And so then he has this like her red lipstick all over his mouth. And he goes in to like have this showdown with Lopan. And nobody's saying anything, but he looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it looks like he's wearing lipstick.
Yep.
So, and as they're riding up in the elevator, Kim Cattrall or Gracie's like, you know, do you have a gun? He's like, I have a knife. She's like, you have a knife? She's like, this guy is like 12 feet tall. He's like, he's 7 feet tall. I can handle it.
Right. And he's like, tells her that he's taken this drink and he's like, I can see
Yeah.
do things normal men can't do.
Yeah.
And that's when she's like, oh, really? And then that's when they kiss.
Yeah. So it gets out though, and they go and, yeah, they have a fight. It's, you know, the whole showdown, and Wang is there too. And they're still fighting because there was still, Thunder still there.
Yeah.
So Jack hurls his knife at Lopan and he misses. And it just falls on the floor and it's the thunk. And it's just like, and James Hong's this face is just like, okay, you know, like it's kind of laughing at him because it's just, and Kim Cattrall's like, see your knife. I told you, like this is, so then Lopan picks up the knife and he's like, you know, goodbye, Mr. Burton or something like that. And throws it at Jack, but Jack, with his cat-like reflexes, catches the knife and immediately throws it back and stabs Lopan right in the head.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
So that's the end of Lopan.
Right.
Because he's got a knife in his head. And then Thunder, I think, is the only one left.
No, there's 2 left.
Oh, there's two left?
This is where I start to be impatient with this because we've killed Lopan, the big bad's dead, but now we've still got to deal with Thunder, who he basically just kills himself.
Oh, it's Thunder and Lightning are left.
Right. Thunder basically does himself in because he gets
does that
so
thing
angry.
where he gets angry and he puffs up, and this time he explodes.
Right.
Which is also great. I love this effect too, by the way,
yeah.
where he's just like all puffed up and it's like this little tiny face and he's huge. And we don't see him actually explode, but like they're out in the hallway and you see pieces of him.
Yes. And then
they have Lightning chasing them.
Yeah, because Wang killed Rain in the sword fight.
Okay.
So there's 2 of the storms left. So then Lightning comes down through the ceiling or whatever, and then they've got to escape through like a hole in the ceiling, and
Egg shows up. And
he has got this crossbow that's got a like zip line on it. He shoots it down, and then we gotta watch. We gotta watch every character go up this zip line.
This time we have to watch everybody go up the zip line, whereas before, like, we didn't have to watch them when they were escaping through tunnels.
It just feels labored.
That is a bit much.
Yeah, and then they defeat Lightning, a guy who can shoot lightning with his hands by like dropping a like Buddha statue on him. Did we need 5 minutes of film to get to this whole last little battle?
I agree with you here.
This should have been wrapped up quicker.
We should have wrapped it up faster.
They should have killed the other storms in the big fight.
The big battle. And then just had the showdown with Lopan. The end. Agreed.
But they find Jack's truck, the Pork Chop Express, which is really what he's been wanting most of all the whole time. And they escape as the police are coming. And then Gracie's like, stop, because they come to a stoplight.
Uh-huh.
And then they stop and they're all sort of relieved. Seems a little awkward, right? Like that's how we sort of end this. Well, there's a reason, and it's because I watched the extra scene. There was more to this. Mm-hmm. Originally, when they stop at that stoplight, the way it is now, she's just like, stop, and they all stop, and then Wang and his bride make out, and Gracie's like, isn't that nice, or whatever. But in the original cut, then they look up and they saw the punk rock gangsters or whatever from the airport, And Jack's like, I've got a bone to pick with them or whatever. And he chases them to the docks and he pushes their car. They're in like a sports car and he pushes their sports car into the bay or whatever.
Well, I would have rather had that and cut out some of the fight we just talked about
Yeah.
at the end. Unnecessary. Like, I would have rather had 5 minutes of him, like, taking care, like, kind of having full circle with his gang.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that stole his truck.
Exactly. So, yeah, they tie up that loose end in that extra scene, but it was cut. So, yeah, we're at the end. They all gather back at the restaurant again, and
Wang gives Jack his money and then some. He's like triple.
gives him triple.
Yep.
And Egg Shen says, like, this is,
I'm going on vacation.
he's like, yeah, this has been my whole life's work or
Yep.
whatever to stop the evil from coming, and so now I'm going to go on vacation, making no sense of the first scene.
Nope.
And Jack and Gracie kind of have this thing where Margot's like, aren't you going to kiss her? Well, she's like, it's this whole thing of, are they going to get together? And Jack's like, oh, people people get sick
you'll
of me.
get sick of me. And
she's like, well, maybe you can make me a apartment
in the truck, or get a bigger truck or something like
Right.
that. Because he was like, well, he was saying, I'm offering you again to come out, leave everything behind, come out on the road or whatever. And she's like, yeah, they're just doing this. Neither one of them wants to change their lives.
Yes.
Basically, they like each other. Neither one of them wants to make any sort of compromise. But if we see each other again, great. And that's just kind of how it is.
And then the real relationship of the film, Jack and Wang, comes to its conclusion where they just talk to each other at the door. And Jack's like, we really brought down like the thunder from the heavens, didn't we, Wang? And Wang's like, no horseshit, Jack.
Yeah.
And so then Jack takes off and we are back in the Pork Chop Express and it's raining and he's talking about like,
He's on a
if you ever
CB.
find yourself on a dark and stormy night, you tell him Jack Burton said,
Just listen to the old Pork Chop Express here now and take this as his advice on a dark and stormy night when the lightning's crashing and the thunder's rolling and the rain's coming down. He's paying homage to the names of the 3 storms.
oh yeah, that makes sense. And the camera pans back and we see that the monster,
That took Kim Cattrall, the unidentifiable monster.
orangutan thing,
Yeah.
is hiding
In the
in
truck.
the back of the truck. The end.
The end.
Okay, so yeah, like I said, box office wise, this movie didn't do too great. It opened to $2.7 million, which is pretty bad even for the 80s. It went on to gross $11 million, and that was on a budget that was estimated to be between 19 and 25 million. So it didn't even make its money back at all and was considered a big flop. The reviews were okay, I think. I feel like they quote Rotten Tomatoes and say that its Rotten Tomatoes score is kind of high, but I feel like that's not accurate because that's probably not taking into account the reviews that came out in the 80s. That's like nerds who love the movie now, giving it a higher Rotten Tomatoes rating. But I think it was more or less liked by critics enough. I think they were like, yeah, it's fun. They appreciated what John Carpenter was homaging, his chop-socky homage and whatever. But financially, there's no argument that it was a commercial failure. Now, Jennifer, why do you think it was a failure?
Well, I mean, just the fact that I wouldn't know how to sell this to somebody. Hey, do you like martial arts and Chinese mysticism and Indiana Jones? And I mean, I don't, it's kind of just all over the map. It's like something, if you could get somebody to watch it, they'll like it. But how do you get somebody to watch it?
Yeah.
And I think Kurt Russell was kind of he's a name at that point, but was he a big enough star to draw people into the theater? Was anyone a big enough star to draw people into the theater probably at that time?
Kurt Russell arguably was never a big enough star to draw people into the theater. I mean, he had probably a bigger heyday in the early 90s when he was in, like action stuff more, but he was never even a Bruce Willis or anything. Like he was an actor that people loved and, they would see movies that he would be in, but it wasn't like, oh, Kurt Russell's in it. He was in tons of movies that didn't do well. We've talked about them.
Yeah.
He certainly never had the sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, even Bruce Willis type of box office clout.
Well, and it wouldn't be Kim Cattrall wouldn't do Mannequin until 87, so no one really knew who she was yet either. I mean, she had like she was in Porky's and had done some other stuff.
Yeah, she was in movies,
but I mean, after I would say after Mannequin, like people would definitely know who she is more than but before then she hadn't done a lot of stuff, or especially hadn't been like the lead.
Yeah, there's nothing in this movie that would get past your average script reader in any way, shape, or form, because it just does not stick to any kind of rules that would be deemed marketable. Story structure wise, it's all over the place. It's just a complete and utter, I don't want to say mess, because that's not really being fair to the movie, but it's such an oddity. It's such a collection of quirks and weirdness, and it just goes wherever it wants to go. So the fact that it did not do well is not surprising at all. And like you were saying, yeah, impossible to market. I mean, the only thing at the time you could even compare it to would be an Indiana Jones movie.
But it's so not that.
Right, it's not that either.
But that's the only thing that keeps coming to my mind.
No, I'm sure that's exactly what they were hoping this would capture, was that Indiana Jones type of heat. You know, you've got Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, Big Trouble in Little China. It's even got the same kind of ring to it as an Indiana Jones movie. It's a messy film. I wouldn't say it's a mess, but it is messy.
That's a great way to put it.
And messy things are things that we can love. I think we all love messy things.
Sure we do.
I would also, just in closing, like to say that if you are a fan of awkward 80s pop music, you owe it to yourself to check out the video for the end theme called Big Trouble in Little China, because in the 80s, to those kids who weren't there for it, a lot of times movies would have songs, pop songs, as their closing credits that would have the actual name of the movie in the closing credits. And the great thing about the song Big Trouble in Little China is that it is written by John Carpenter, who is also a musician, and it's performed by his rock band, the Coupe de Villes. And in the Coupe de Villes is Nick Castle, who went on to become a director of note on his own, and he also played Michael Myers in the first Halloween, and their song is really kind of awesomely bad, and the video is really kind of awesomely bad.
It's so great.
It's like them editing the movie, but they're also jamming out on the song, and then they're cutting in pieces of the movie.
I love it.
It's so
I just
dorky.
love it.
It's dorky.
It's dorky, but I love it. I'm gonna watch it again now.
Yeah, it's cool. It comes on the digital download or whatever.
I'm so here for it.
It's great if you love dorky 80s attempts at pop.
I do.
Highly recommend. It will definitely be in the episode.
Oh yeah.
Big Trouble
in Little China.
All right, I'm going to kidnap the green-eyed woman and drive my big rig into an alleyway and kung fu fight some demons.
I'm just going to go watch that John Carpenter, Nick Castle video for the 10th time.
The Coupe de Villes.
The Coupe de Villes.
That about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.